It's so great to have everybody with us. Maybe we'll get started. I'm gonna just do a quick introduction and say that this is a online lecture series. We're so excited to kick it off with the first one today. I'm really delighted to have you with us. I'm going to pass it over to Jessica for a kind of introduction to the series. But just to say, we're the Future Sketches group at the MIT Media Lab. We're looking at the intersection of art, design, technology, thinking about what are tools that artists and designers will be using in the future. And as part of the group, the master's students work on a thesis project. And I asked the master's students to program a lecture series around their topic, around their thesis. And so this lecture series is programmed by Jessica, and I'll pass it to them to explain their thesis and what they're working on and a bit about the series, but really delighted to have you with us. This is an informal series. We invite Q&A. So if as the lecture is happening, feel free to ask questions, and we'll get to them in the series. And then one other thing I wanted to mention or just highlight, make sure that you're aware that there are 4 talks. So this is the first talk, but we're going to have a series of talks, usually on Friday, sometimes on Thursday, and just, invite you to come to all of them, but just want to mention that this lecture series will be sort of ongoing once a week. We're sort of breaking during Thanksgiving. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is that the Future Sketches group is currently recruiting students. So if there's anybody who's interested in learning more about being a student in Future Sketches, we're going to have an info session next week on Tuesday. It's a virtual open house. And even if you can't make it, if you sign up, we'll share the recording with you. So this will be a virtual open house where you can get to know us and learn about what we're working on. And if this seems like something that's interesting to you, we'd love to get you this information. So I don't know if Jessica, if you can share that link in the chat. Um, yeah, but we'll paste the link for you for what I'm mentioning. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jessica to introduce our speaker and talk a bit about the series and what they're working on. So really delighted to have everybody with us.
Yeah, hi. So I'm super excited to be kicking off this series, the very first talk with David Rothenberg. I am looking at for my thesis. It's provocatively titled like a birdwatcher's guide to creative coding, and I'm trying to figure out what that means. So I've gotten to invite some like 4 really great speakers who are kind of poking at how nature can inform creative practice and computation and such. So I'm very excited for David to be sharing a bit about sounds and birds and things like that. Maybe I can hand it off then to David to get started.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to kick off this amazing series. And yes, everyone's always creating with nature. We can't escape it. Since we're part of nature, we're always defining ourselves against nature. And yet we know that's a little bit off, that we're still part of it. And I'm a musician and philosopher, writer, professor who's for a long time been interested in really making music together with nature and wondering what it means and writing books about it. Like I'd say many people do this kind of thing, but because they're deep into doing it, they don't often step back and start to write about it when then you question everything you're doing, which is kind of a dangerous thing to do in some ways. But if you study philosophy as your starting point, all you do is question everything your whole life, and none of the answers are very satisfying. I went to Harvard as an undergraduate in the early 1980s. There I was studying music and anthropology and literature. I would say all of my professors became professors in the 60s when it seemed like all kinds of crazy people could become a professor. And they all were against all tradition and do everything radical. Don't look back, look forward. And I kind of enjoyed that and went in that direction and wrote an undergraduate thesis on improvisation and how it connected to notation, writing. How could you write down things that you were making up on the spot? And then later I went to Europe and worked for different environmental organizations and magazines, and then somehow came back and studied philosophy at Boston University. But while I was studying philosophy, I did some things with Todd Mackover in the Media Lab. Kind of in the beginnings of his time there, we worked on this nature project, actually. I would say it was 1989 or 1990, an In the Rainforest piece in the black box in the Media Lab, where we turned the whole thing into like a forest of sounds. And over the years, I've come back occasionally. You're definitely at a cool place where all kinds of amazing things are being done. And now I'm professor of philosophy and music at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, which NJIT is not quite like MIT because it's a state school, but it's a kind of fun place. A lot of the students, they're the first generations in their families to go to college. And, you know, we didn't even have a music department. I just sort of invented it just to do what I want. So I teach them some of the things you're going to hear about now, and they sort of think it's normal to learn about music and nature as your only music class. Why not? So I'm going to talk a bit about whatever animals you want to hear about. I'll start with birds, because bird watchers are interested in creative coding now, so we have to find out what that means. And at least people have always been coding bird sounds for centuries, trying to figure out how to write them down and interact with them. And so let's see what happens. So now I'm going to share my screen, see if everything works, see what happens. Any questions? I'm not going to be reading the chat, so let someone else read it if you have any questions and complaining like the sound is or something like that. So first I show you this little, a kind of 3-minute introduction to kind of things I'm doing. This is sort of focusing on bug sounds. We made this during the pandemic when you couldn't do anything else but go in your backyard and play music with bugs. This film is made by Louis Rapkin, a great film editor and director. And he happened to live down the street and had no work, so we could spend time making this.
I'm so happy to be invited today to play along with this distinguished orchestra. These guys are really old school, and there's so much wisdom you can hear from them, the real greats. We've got Carolina ground crickets, bush katydids, tree crickets, and a whole distinguished ensemble. I've learned a lot from many musicians I've played with. Humpback whales in Hawaii, nightingales in Berlin, lyrebirds in Australia, beluga whales in Russia. Oh, it's very loud over here. This is late August, this is insect time. This is a hydrophone, it's an underwater microphone. It picks up sound underwater, and there can be all kinds of creatures. A whole human interest in noise as music. Technologies that make washes of sounds, distorted guitars, electronic instruments. It all comes back to this world of bug sound. Our whole biology and culture evolved in the presence of all this. That might got someone the idea to start having a rhythm and shake something. These layers of rhythms. One is going, another's going, and then the katydids are going, There were bugs on this planet long before there were these more complicated creatures like birds and us. So this is like some of the oldest music you'll ever hear. Bugs are our ever-distant ancestors. We're hearing some connection to the voice of the ancestors. The insects remind us where we came from.
Okay, so let me show you where I first came up with the idea you could play live along with animals. In this case, birds. In the year 2000, that is actually me. I was at the National Aviary in Pittsburgh. We actually have a National Aviary of the United States in Pittsburgh. And I was wandering around at 6 a.m. with my clarinet, seeing if any birds had any interest in what was going on. Okay, so this got me kind of interested about why was this one bird, a white-crested laughing thrush, interested in the clarinet? And lots of people in the aviary knew these laughing thrushes would interact with people with all kinds of sounds. I kind of assumed, because I'd taken biology class at Harvard with E.O. Wilson, that, oh, birds are singing songs. The male birds are singing to attract a mate, to defend a territory. I figured this guy was kind of angry with me somehow. But then I went and read the only 2 papers written about the song of the white-crested laughing thrush. And it turns out this species does something totally different. The males and females both sing. And there's plenty of birds where the males and females both make sounds, most notably around here, the cardinals, the males and females both sing. Usually it's very simple sounds, but in the laughing thrush, it's very song-like little phrases that have this musical quality. And so I thought, if I didn't play along with this bird, I never would have thought about this, never would have started to realize that every bird is like a world into itself, an aesthetic world into itself. This is why in Descent of Man, Darwin wrote 2 chapters on birds. And he said birds have a natural aesthetic sense. That's why they've evolved beautiful feathers and beautiful songs. And natural selection, survival of the fittest, couldn't really explain why bird song often sounds so cool. Now, it's not, in many human languages, certain sounds of birds are called songs. We've recognized there's something musical about them, maybe distinguished from calls, which have more specific linguistic-like meaning. Like this is the song of the veery. It's a pretty common bird around the woods, around Cambridge or here. This sound means a lot to veeries. If you're measuring what's going on in their brains, sections will light up only when they hear this. For humans, it kind of goes by really fast. If you slow it down, however, it becomes this. Not only does it sound like musical notes when brought back into the pitch and scale of humanity, but it is, it has this kind of jazz-like inflections and its breathiness, like a trumpet solo by Miles Davis or something like that. And that I think is really extraordinary. However, a long time ago, 1907, when you couldn't really transcribe, you couldn't really slow down the sound of a veery, this guy wrote a book called Field Guide to Wild Birds and Their Music, F. Schuyler Matthews. And he managed to write down this top image that kind of resembles what you just heard. How could he hear that? And it's really amazing that he transcribed it without any technological tools. But he recognized with his swirly diagram on top that the notion of bird song as being music kind of tested the limits of human notation. In the bottom image, which is from the 1950s, another Field Guide to Bird Sounds by Aretas Saunders, he described it in this kind of experimental notation. You know, I don't know what he's talking about, but it sort of makes sense. Trying to describe, to transcribe, write down these kind of alien musical or linguistic phrases whose meaning, I think, isn't something you translate. It's not like the Veery is trying to say something very specific that you could analyze. The meaning comes out in the performance, having been done just the right way. So that makes it hard to write down. For the slowed down version, you can transcribe it like this. Although you could easily play it, it seems a little boring to turn that into this somehow. And one of the themes in my work is finding different ways to represent the musicality of animal sounds, in addition to playing along with them to represent this. And I think it's a constant puzzle, and I think that more work can be done to make it better. So I'm always looking for digital artist collaborators to think how we could better represent the musicality of animal sounds. So the hermit thrush looks a lot like the Veery. It's more famous. Its song is like this. A lot has been written about this bird by T.S. Eliot, Henry David Thoreau, John Burroughs, and these naturalists and poets talked about this is the ultimate bird music in the New England woods. And even the best analytical writing on the hermit thrush is by a Hungarian musicologist, Peter Szöke, and he wrote about this bird rather than any European birds because he recognized this musicality. And yet it's very far from human music. Things people heard is this openness, this airiness, this flute-like reaching up for the heavens. And if you slow it down again and stretch it out, it starts to be more in the human realm, like a searching whistle. Birds have a syrinx instead of a larynx. They can make two sounds at once. Like they're all like Tuvan throat singers. You know, at this speed, you kind of hear what's alien and musical about this, which inspired me to slow it down even more. And I show this to you together with the kind of sonograms that scientists today use to what they think is objectively represent the sounds of, an alien species or any sounds, any series of sounds. And you're mapping the frequency against the time. And the more clear and dark here the image, the more pure the sound is, the more it's kind of fuzzy, the more overtones and complex the sonogram looks. Let's just play a little bit of this. This is slowed down even more, 8 times slower. Walk this down. There's actually a series of papers by biologists and musicologists arguing as to whether the song of the hermit thrush is music. Do they sing in scales? Some biologists said they do not sing in scales because there's no scales like this that people have recognized. These are not a series of notes that people have used. It just sounds like that to us because we're hearing music in everything, because humans have studied John Cage. We listen to everything. We hear pattern and order, but it's not really there. Most of the musicologists disagree with that and say, come on, a scale is any series of notes. And there's plenty of different ones used by different cultures that overlap. And just because we don't understand why these scales are used doesn't mean they're not there. And of course, to me, the inflection, the fact of, the emotion, the feeling of the timbre and the sense of phrase, that the performance has to be done just a certain way for the message to get across, convinces me that it's more like music than language. It's not believed that the hermit thrush has more to say than the veery that we could translate into anything. It's not like the waggle dance of bees that's telling the other bees where the flowers can be found. Let's listen to more of this, and you just think if it doesn't make any sense to you as some kind of music from another world. I'm often playing this song for students and other people and ask them whether they think it's musical. And some of them say immediately it is. Others say, what kind of music is that? I have no idea where to place that. It's just a horrible, strange, annoying sound. I just want to play it for you and have you think about it, but we'll move on. It should be said, by the way, that although a few musicologists and composers wrote about the musicality of this very song and how impressed they were by it, most musicologists, most music theorists have nothing to say about music made by animals. They don't really think it's music. In fact, I remember in college learning how do you define what music is? There was this definition that music is organized sound, and then they would often add humanly organized sound, which I think is a pretty bad definition. It seems like after many years of going to all kinds of strange concerts, music is some sounds that someone tells you are musical. This is music, listen to it. It could be anything, but someone has to set it in the context. This is a musical context. Take this in, consider this as music. Like go to a concert. I think we've all been to concerts where some people hear it and just think it's noise. This is not music. But if someone told you to take it in as music, they're asking you to consider it as such. You don't have to like it, but you can't say it isn't music if it's put forth in a musical context. So this is some technological ways to take a bird's song that might be out of range of graspability and turn it into something humans can musically interact with. But it's actually more fun to go out live and just play with it. Go on for it. Okay, let's see the same thing. It's like a sonogram representation. Sorry, next one. Yeah, at least part of it. Yeah, so this is an example of using this kind of visual sound editing software called spectral layers, using it the wrong way. What spectral layers excels at is very visually way you can take an audio file and split it up into different layers, identify a sound, make it a layer, edit that layer separate from something else. So if you were really smart, you take every bird, give it its own layer, its own color, and then the clarinet its own layer and color, and select it. But it also has all these AI features, like it can take an audio file and split it up into things, the things that people want. Like take this audio file, split it into piano, bass, drums, vocal, and guitar, and keyboards. Like that's something they imagine people would want. Create your own stems of a song. So that's what happens when you plug in a guy playing clarinet along with birds and try and divide it into piano, voice, drums, keyboards. It comes out like this. And then you finesse the colors so that it creates this colorful, strange looking thing that it's kind of more interesting than doing it the way you're supposed to. And here I'm trying to like come up with the most beautiful visualizations that kind of show in a way that what I feel is this musicality, the interaction of rhythm and tones between different things. So this is in a way like, you know, like we often do, pushing, you know, software tools in some direction they weren't designed for. And I think I'm not someone who invents my own software. I probably should, but I like taking things that exist and seeing if I can bend them to my will. And yeah, we're going to go to well, let's see, what time is it? I think we're going to go talk about ponds now. I can go on with birds. There's so many more bird things, but ponds are more unusual because people really don't, people often think of bird song as musical. They don't think of pond sounds as musical. So I'm skipping ahead to that. Although I might just show you one thing beforehand. That's not it. I'm going to show you one example where people often ask, you know, does doing this change your own sense of music? I said, yeah, sometimes. This is my favorite example of that when we're working on this film, Nightingales in Berlin, and I'm going to play music with nightingales live because they leave a lot of space for someone to join in. So this is my favorite example of when this process was kind of changing my sense of how you could play the clarinet, how music interacts together with a bird live. Yeah, I felt after weeks of playing live along with nightingales who have their own aesthetic, like Darwin talked about, their own way of playing these short phrases. They know like 150 of them. Then they leave space for someone to join in, usually another nightingale. But if someone's playing an instrument with them, they're kind of interested in that. They're really interacting with song in a way not every bird is. And by the time I'd done it enough, I really felt my idea of how I should play my instrument, what I counted as music, had really started to change. And that's really the reason why I do this. This is the book I wrote about it. And there was different albums and films. And then we're not going to skip this cool science part we can go back to. And let's talk about ponds. I should say, I'll start with here that I wrote with two scientists, we wrote a paper about using, a naturalist method, the neuroscientist method, and the musician's method to make sense of mockingbird songs, which kind of relate to nightingales. But in our paper, we had this quote saying, well, science should never claim to be everything. It should never claim to be the only way to understand nature. It lacks humanity when it misses a sense of play and rhyme, when it forgets that I and world are one. There is no knowledge, only discussion. When it loses sight of humankind as nature's way of creating paradox, linguistic pleasure, and novel modes of distraction and destruction, which were engraved as potential in the first molecule of rugged and ragged life, when it fails to see itself in every rock and tree and star. This is from the Zen poet Norman Fisher. You can imagine the reviewers of this paper, how much they fought to keep this out, but we got it in there. This is from Frontiers in Psychology. So I always think that science sees the world one way, maybe a certain class of ways, musicians in other ways, poets another. You got to use everything that humans have to make sense of nature and interact with it, which is why I decided to investigate the secret sounds of ponds. And underwater, ponds are making all kinds of cool sounds, and you hear nothing above the water. Often they're made by insects like the water boatman. Sound is not like a passion sheet. These things are like 1 centimeter long. They can be as loud as whales, and they vibrate their penis against the body. This is a hydrophone that I developed to record this kind of sound. These are whirligig beetles that next to the hydrophone, they don't make any sound. But underwater, you have this world that we don't really understand, but you can listen to it, and it kind of can sound like this. This is like a competitive battle of underwater bugs moving their penis around. And this was only discovered a few years ago. And sometimes it's so loud that you think something's wrong with your equipment. You can't imagine it's that loud. Other times you hear nothing. You can't predict what's going on. And here, it resembles the sound of terrestrial insects and all this stuff. And you can sense that, you hear nothing above the water, but when you hear underwater, a familiar kind of sense of sound as rhythm, musicality, but also competition. And here now I start to play along with it. I'm kind of remixing it live, adding some other sounds. That's the sound of a plant that regularly. Also, then I start to sample it. So this was, see what this one is. I'm not sure what this one is. Same one? Yes. Okay, here's an example of plant versus animal. With the plant sounds in the background. That's a back swimmer, a similar bug that goes. This increasing sound here is not an insect but a plant. It's kind of the sound of photosynthesis. It's releasing oxygen from underwater into the air, like tiny bubbles you can't see. You see no bubbles when this kind of thing happens. It becomes a bug again. So these rhythms are made by plants. And it's not like personifying what the plant is doing. You actually hear this with the underwater microphone. It's kind of fun to discover that these sounds are all around you and nobody really listens. Different species. Supposedly also a plant in the background, but yeah, and so this is, here he is again. This is again, it was a pandemic project that kind of developed from couldn't go anywhere except into the woods and play around with pawns. I'll just play you this one piece, a collaboration with an artist in the Netherlands from Turkey, Ilgin Deniz Aksologlu. At the time, I never met her. We just started talking about these pawns. She thought my sonograms were all pretty ugly, so she made her own version of this collaborative piece made out of recordings of pawns and kind of resonated. Let's see how it comes out.
To go over this quicksand of quicksand. The sound teaches me. Now I love you too. Let's make drama. There is no gap. Pulls me over, pushes me away. Pull me over, push me away. When? Tell me. When? I say when. The sound says now.
Okay, I'll answer your questions now. Thanks for listening. Hope it made sense.
Read them off.
Of course, we could just go on and on with different examples and directions.
Or more bird things or something.
Any questions? Any thoughts on how this connects to things you're thinking about and would like to think about?
How when you were working with the nightingales, you were kind of.
Yeah, your voice is cut out somehow. After nightingales, I didn't hear anything.
Switch. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Okay, maybe my son. Sorry. Yes, I can hear you over there. Yeah. So I wanted to continue. I wanted to thank you so much for it. And then if folks want to leave questions in the chat, that would be fantastic. But I wanted to kick it off with a question about when you were talking about with nightingales, you were like kind of leaving spaces and kind of changing the way that you were performing with them. Did you notice similar things with the performing with ponds too?
Yes, definitely, because the pond sounds, you're not, they sort of alien at first, and sometimes you hear these incredible rhythms from plants and you don't know what it is. And then once I recorded a plant, it sounds like a screaming analog synthesizer. I couldn't even believe hearing it. And Alice Eldridge, who took me there, goes, "Oh yeah, this plant's always making that sound. I don't know why." Like, what? It didn't sound like any other plant I or anyone else had ever heard. And she seemed to think it was normal, but we had no explanation. Above the water, there was no sound. I mean, I know physically what is supposed to be happening, but it's still like the sounds can be very surprisingly, like it's really what you don't expect. And because people are always sonifying natural data, they assume it's sonification, that you're just turning data into these sounds, which it isn't. And the fact that it just comes, what you're hearing underwater really surprises me. So all kinds of things change. Like one thing I like to do is resonate them. Then they have this kind of tingling sound, which I guess is a kind of sonification, but it comes from the clicking, crackling sounds. My friend David De La Haye, who does a lot of pond music in England, he thinks it's all a variant of ASMR, like it makes you have this tingly, chilling feeling. And I said, okay. And so I think it all changes how you respond, what you think is musical. In recent years, I've gotten really interested in bringing other people out to do it with me. So it's not just me alone doing it. It's more fun to watch other people do it. I've taken a lot of people each year to play music with whales in Hawaii, like really just invite others. Let's see you do it. What do you want to do? And I get more interested in how other people may interact, how they pick up on different musical things. And that's kind of an evolution from feeling that it's just me alone facing the wilderness. I might have started out. Do you want me to read these chat questions, or is someone going to read them to me?
I can read it to you, be a different voice. Alberto asks,
Yeah.
What is the thing that has most stood out to you in recognizing and playing with the musicality of the nature around us? Or maybe the thing that you'd hope stood out to people encountering your work?
Oh, that if you hear music in nature, we care more about nature. And if many people listen and take this in, I want to join in. It's as if I want to prove there might be a place for humanity in this beautiful world. Many people say, quiet. It doesn't need you. It's so beautiful without you. In fact, I've had people come in Berlin and like kick the microphone and scream at me. And these birds sounded so beautiful until you showed up. And it's like, okay, I can see your point, but I'm still going to do it, right? Because obviously nature doesn't need us to intrude, to invade, but humanity is always there with the natural world. One reason I did this whole project in Berlin is these birds are setting up their territories on street lamps next to traffic, next to clubs where the music is pounding all night. They're doing that, so they know where they are. And it's kind of like, okay, they're interested in sound. I feel like animals are really interested in sound. In different ways, we can learn from how they respond to sounds. And we can imagine we're also animals who can take them more seriously by playing along. I mean, I play these sounds. I heard right now I was playing, the nightingale, and then I heard a cardinal outside going, boop, 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 like, what? What's that? You know, they listen. They're interested in other weird things that are going on. And so every time I do it, I'm surprised at what happens. And once you decide to listen to sounds around, you hear this sense of order and music, and it makes the world more alive and beautiful.
Very nice. We have couple more questions. The sound and visual in nature and the artificial gives a cathedral life experience. Do you have any preference when you display the visual aspect of your live show? I'm a visualist, so I'm also interested in this too. Like,
what kind of preference? Like, what do you mean?
Like-
What kind of preference?
like I don't know what they mean, but like one thing, like when I do visuals for a performer, like sometimes it can distract from the experience of listening, or like how do you make it like go
If
into
I'm playing, I'm usually not using visuals unless it's a talk, but I want other people to do that. I would give this material to someone who knows more. What can you do? What could you do with this to make it really work? Like the other day, I met a woman who does like these incredible stagings for operas with projection mapping and things, and they look so cool. It's not like the operas needed that, but it becomes enhanced more. And I would love if someone with those kinds of skills took this material and worked with it. Like I don't want to do it all. I'm doing enough already myself. I don't want to do it all myself. I benefit from people who know more and think about that stuff. And so I've been trying. I really want to work on some project where we revise the scientific notion of sonograms, make them better by getting artists, musicians, scientists together. Like, let's improve this technology. It's pretty much been static since the 1950s. It's not really that different, and you could make it a lot different if you just knew more about all these things. People are starting to. Other people are starting to get it. You know, there's some scientists who are really exploring this in different ways. There's a way a lot of computer scientists work with animal sound data, grouping it into patterns so it plays this kind of graph of similarity that's not linear, but showing that these patterns appear, and that people are doing a lot of interesting visual things with that. I don't understand it as much, so when I see it, I can't really play along, but I see what the value is of that and where you can go.
Thank you so much. This is the kind of immersion experience I was thinking about. Yeah, so I asked that question thinking about the possibility to have collaboration in the future somehow that may bring those visuals alive.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that. I went to this immersive art museum that's in New York. That's a Korean project called Arte, where they have all these whales that appear in waves, and it's some people think it's kitschy. I think it's pretty hard not to like it. It's like, wow, this is all cool. But several of us also thought that when there's no visuals, the immersive quality of sound is also quite powerful. So I'm doing some projects in December in Brooklyn at this immersive sound place called Reforesters that has an ambisonic 24-channel sound system. We're going to move these whale sounds around you. And one of them is like a whale meditation session, 1 hour, one whale song, just sit and listen to it. Because almost always these whale songs are reduced to just a few minutes. And yet they go on and on. The whales are obviously hearing it at stretched out time scale. Let's just do it, see what happens to us. And then another event is to play a concert live with the whale sounds where they'll be manipulated more. The kind of thing I've done much more of in the past. That event has no visuals. It's going to be at least the first one in the dark. But you could do all kinds of visual things. And I do want to do more things like that. I'm going to work on the sound design for a new whale museum called The Whale in northern Norway. It looks like a whale. And me and 2 Norwegians, the guys who are coming to Brooklyn as well, we now got the job of doing the sound. So we're going to try and make something very different and interesting that nobody has seen before. And that project should have some visuals as part of it. And there's a lot of things that one could figure out that haven't been done. One aspect of this whole work is get people to listen to this musicality in nature more. Like, there's so many films about humpback whales that have the song in it. None of them takes the song seriously. They'll just play like, and then the orchestra comes in, the Hans Zimmer soundtrack, the electric guitar. It's right away the human comes in. Now, I'm guilty of that too because I play along with whales. But I think we really should take our audience more seriously and listen to the whale whale song. Present that along with all the other beautiful nature things that are shown in such films and TV programs. Take the sound seriously. Like, people can handle it.
Thank you so much. You remind me of John Cage listening to music with closed eyes. Just listen.
Yeah, he would probably listen with closed ears, you know.
Thank you so much.
He has a big influence on me. He came to Harvard when I was there. I watched him work on his lectures and kind of figure things out. He believed in chance operations, but he was also extremely opinionated at the same time.
Exactly.
It was nice to see, right?
Nice. And it's great that you were able to mention some of the whale work in your future work too.
Yeah, I could go
Anything
on. I can talk about whales, go on and on with these things, but
I will recommend it to the crowd to look into the whale work. It's very cool. We've one more question around about if there's been any study with the nature and how it's responded to your performances, like body language or
body language or me, right?
I guess the animals.
Yeah, they respond in different ways. I haven't done like a formal scientific study of that, but you can listen to the sounds and hear how they change sometimes. And I have enough data that somebody could study it, and you know, you could definitely look at what changes, what doesn't change, how much. Like the nightingales want to impress you. So if you're making sounds, sometimes they'll do impressive things like go, and they're going to do it longer than you could, or they're doing their coolest things that come in at different points. And then whales are constantly changing their songs. So sometimes you get the feeling they learn from sounds that I'm playing. But I could be just imagining that. Although I played it for a whale scientist who said there's no way the whales would do that. And when he heard something, he just stood up and said, "Oh, maybe I was wrong about that." Like he had listened to so many of the songs, he heard things that I didn't hear. And these days, it's very popular to claim that AI is going to decode the language of whales, which might help. I think if you look at animal behavior and the real insights that people have come up with, they usually come from somebody who spent years listening to something, figured something out, and then might ask the computer to help test it. The idea that the machine is going to find things that we can't notice might happen, but I think it's no substitute for the time spent paying attention to nature. You know, I'm not one of the people who believes machines can do that all that well. You know, they can do some things, but I'm open to being convinced, I must say. But I still think that, humans working together with technologies is the way to go. The technologies might be musical instruments, they might be, software, AI methods. I know my friend Mason Youngblood, you should invite him to speak. He's like totally brilliant young birdsong scientist and DJ. And he's like created like models of catbirds, a bird that nobody really understands. And his like algorithm can sound like a catbird and interact with it because it's listened to hundreds of hours of catbirds and it's like can be somewhat convincing because we don't understand catbirds. They don't have these repetitive patterns that people like.
I would definitely go to a DJ show that's just like
Well, I'm playing
exclusively
one with
catbird.
February in Brooklyn.
Oh, nice.
So yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I think we're at the end of our hour, and I want to thank David so much for a really like interesting and insightful talk.
I want to make sure I can read this
interesting-
chat. We have to save it. I'm going to read it now.
Yeah,
later.
I think I'll get it saved. This was recorded, so if you guys joined later, you'll be able to I'll upload it to the same place, the Media Lab page, when the recording is done, so you can check out the beginning
if
of
anybody
it.
wants to ask me more questions, I'm around. I'm easy to find, and there's a lot more of this kind of stuff you can look at. That's everywhere, yeah. And one project I'm working on is with about probably the coolest bird to play with in the world is the Blythe's reed warbler, which is a totally obscure bird, lives in Eastern Europe and Russia. And nobody knows anything about this bird except this woman who lives in the woods who's sort of on the spectrum. All she does is transcribe songs of this bird in this comic book notation on her YouTube page. It's called her name is Flacco Weasel. And I couldn't believe when I discovered this, that such a thing existed. This is what the internet is good for. Like, oh my God, this is like an incredible obsession. And the people in the bird song world are so interested in this. Because this is actually a bird that Merlin, the bird song app, cannot identify because it sings too many different things. It just doesn't get it. And even and then here's this one woman who's just devoted to this bird's song in her own unique way that's like no one else. She thinks a whole different way. So I've been to visit her and played along with this bird. I'm going to do more of that and put that in my next book somehow. But it's really like this unique thing. Like we don't really understand what animals are doing. So all kinds of different approaches can help. So yeah, so thanks a lot for inviting me. Hope to meet some of you in person sometime. Anybody around in New York in December, you can come to these whale events. And
Yeah,
thanks a
I
lot.
will be keeping it in. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.